And various reports this morning that the Trump administration is close to announcing the dismantling of the Department of Education. Earlier this week, the Senate confirmed nominee Linda McMahon to be the Secretary of Education. Let's bring in now Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, who is joining us live from Capitol Hill. Joe, what are we hearing about this development this morning?
Well, Liz, as you know, it's really tough to classify this development as breaking news, given the fact that President Trump campaigned on dismantling the Department of Education. When he initially announced Linda McMahon as his nominee to be the Secretary of Education, he joked that if she did her job successfully, she would essentially be ultimately firing herself. Of all of the government agencies that have really frustrated President Trump, and that may be an understatement over the years, the Department of Education is one of them. The president has a belief that the states need to have more say over where funding goes. And as you noted, Liz, earlier this week is when the Senate finally confirmed President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Education. So now, to use a football analogy, he has his quarterback in position to handle the dismantling. The Wall Street Journal obtained exclusively, and they're reporting this morning a draft of this, and they suggested that it could change, but it does exactly what you think it might. Downsizing, potential layoffs, mass firings, all appear to be on the table here. It's going to be a challenge, though, for President Trump to just take the motorcade, take the beast from the White House over to the Department of Education and put a for sale sign on it and say closed. And that's because Congress plays a role here. In fact, even during her confirmation hearing, Secretary McMahon acknowledged that to formally disband a cabinet agency, Congress is going to need to play a role here. This is where President Trump runs into a big problem. To get that done, he'll need 60 votes in the United States Senate. He doesn't have 60 votes in the United States Senate because Democrats aren't going to go along with this. So this is why we're likely to enter a phase of a dismantling of the Department of Education as opposed to an outright closing. Or the Trump administration could take their chances in the courts. They've clearly expressed a desire to take this to the courts in the past. As far as parents, educators are for sure. Some teachers' unions have expressed concern that some low-income students, some students with disabilities may be ultimately left behind if the federal government just hands over block funding to the states to decide what to do with it. But that seems to be the path that the Trump administration would love to ultimately go here. And if you're wondering, well, what would happen to other things that the Department of Education is in charge of, like federal loan processing? The conservative blueprint for that for years has been shift that to another government agency. Maybe the Department of Labor handles apprenticeships going forward. Maybe the Department of Treasury handles loan processing going forward. That's the blueprint that conservatives have been trying to implement for years, and new reporting from the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and others this morning, Liz Landers, suggests that we may be on the cusp of the beginning stages of this.
Yeah, there's so many things that people depend on the Department of Education for, also including Pell Grants. So many people rely on that to help fund their education. Joe, as you mentioned, we'll probably see how this plays out in courts, and we may learn more about the plan for dismantling this through court documents. I mean, that is how we've been learning a lot about DOGE and what Elon Musk has been doing with that department. Joe St. George, live for us on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much for your insight.